On Valentine's Day, February 14th, the United States unleashed the power of its air fleet on a secret Islamic State of Iraq and Syria camp located in Syria. As you probably remember, 3 Americans were killed in Syria, and in December they were shot at point-blank range, and we determined that the murder was committed by Islamic State of Iraq and Syria militants who are hiding right there in the territory of Syria. President Trump said that no loss of American life will go unavenged or unpunished. The world must know that for one American life, hundreds, if not thousands, of those who organized, carried out, or caused our losses will be destroyed. I'll show you the details, I'll show you the photos, but first, let's talk a little more about legitimacy. As a former soldier of Sahel, I want to tell you what we always wanted to see. Well, both in Israel and in the United States, one of ours killed, one of ours captured. And rest assured, hundreds or thousands of yours, not an eye for an eye, not 2 of yours for 1 of ours. No, for our 1 eye, 1,000 of yours. And now let's move on to the facts and to video and photo evidence.
This serves as a reminder. If you harm Americans, we will track you down, we will find you, and we will destroy you. And that brings us to this large-scale strike that was announced on Saturday morning, February 14th.
The United States will gradually withdraw from all regions of the planet that do not directly border our country's borders. But the process of leaving or shifting focus requires 2 simultaneous processes. The first is clearing the territory adjacent to us of enemies, including states that are aggressively unfriendly to the United States. Iran, North Korea, some others, and clearing this zone of crime, that is, for example, from cartels and cabinists. We consider both of them as criminal organizations, and our goal is to make the zone around the United States, approximately 2,000 miles around our borders, as friendly as possible, or at the very least neutral. The second B, according to our classification, the second task is, as we withdraw from other regions, to resolve the existing conflicts and wars. Let's say yes, leaving those countries to play the role of police in their own regions, while we played the role of an international global police force. We don't want to do that anymore, and we'll try to organize local security in each major region. That is, so to speak, a kind of regional police. A regional gendarme. For example, what do we want to do? We want to end the war between Russia and Ukraine, and also resolve things between Azerbaijan, Turkey, and Armenia. What we've already finished, for example, ending the war between Rwanda and Congo that took 6 million lives, seems to be finished as well. Or not let the conflict between India and Pakistan escalate. When we leave, we don't want an explosion of violence due to the absence of a restraining force. We want to remove the Houthis, Hezbollah, and Hamas, which were created for violence. They actually have no other goal, except maybe to change the regime in Iran and help establish a government that, together with Saudi Arabia and Israel, will start maintaining order. In their part of the world, naturally, there are many people living by banditry, I don't know how else to put it, profiting from wars, robbery, extortion, arson, and so on. Countries, people, and organizations alike, they understand that this is the end of their way of existence. That's why we are forced to resort to measures that will later be used by countries responsible for the territory of their protectorate, which they oversee, meaning they protect. Yes, and of course, when we're challenged to a fight under Trump, we hit back. And we do it when we want, where we want, and as much as we want. And by no means proportionally.
These are photos of the strikes. So what you see here are the consequences of a powerful bombing on one of Islamic State of Iraq and Syria's strongholds. We have 4 pictures. This is the first one. Another photo, I suppose this one is from drones. 4 bombs were dropped with high precision, quickly, one after another. Boom, 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 boom. The bad guys get warheads right in the forehead. Right here, we see another bomb hit as a result of airstrikes. And then we have another photo taken right here of a powerful explosion hitting an Islamic State of Iraq and Syria stronghold. Their position, frankly, it's incredible to see them being shown, hey, you want to kill Americans, you won't get away with it. The planes are in the air. And here's the famous Apache helicopter.
Is heading after
Justice.
Commander has determined the location of Eagle's camp. Bombers, helicopters, and drones headed toward the designated targets.
I believe that's an F-15 fighter jet, and this is an A-10 attack aircraft. And here we go, it's ready. The traces have disappeared forever. To deal these people a crushing defeat, which they absolutely deserve.
Here's the report from the sitcom about the strike on Islamic State of Iraq and Syria.
Right now in the Middle East, the United States is carrying out a series of airstrikes against Islamic State of Iraq and Syria. United States Central Command says that forces have carried out 10 strikes on more than 30 Islamic State of Iraq and Syria targets. All of this is in response to an ambush attack by the terrorist group in December, which resulted in the deaths of 2 American service members. And American translator Lama Hassan is following this story now from London. Lama, it's good to see you. What else can you tell us?
Thank you, Gio. We're learning more about these strikes. United States Central Command released a statement saying that they carried out 10 strikes, as you just mentioned, on more than 30 targets in Syria belonging to Islamic State of Iraq and Syria, hitting the group's infrastructure as well as weapons storage facilities. And since January of this year, the United States has carried out 5 strikes against this terrorist group, Islamic State of Iraq and Syria.
Already, we've regretted 100 times that 3 Americans were killed. And since December, we've destroyed their barracks, warehouses, and infrastructure 5 times. And on Valentine's Day, there was another one like that, which I think was already the final massive attack on Islamic State of Iraq and Syria. Well, previously, so to speak, it was the Islamic Caliphate, and Trump destroyed it, meaning he destroyed it as a caliphate. But separate branches in other countries remained. And, of course, it won't be us dealing with them anymore, but those regional leaders. And it won't be the United States, so to speak, sending soldiers to destroy them. But for now, Iran is still a thorn in the world's side. And geographically, sitting on the Strait of Hormuz, it poses a threat to the stability of the entire planet's energy system. And this needs to be fixed.
President Donald Trump is increasing pressure on Iran over nuclear negotiations, stating that regime change would be the best thing that could happen. So, listen to what else he said, then we'll talk about it after that.
For 47 years, they've been talking, and in the meantime, we've lost many lives. While they're talking, legs are torn off, arms are torn off, faces are shattered. This has been going on for a long time, so let's see what happens. In the meantime, we've received tremendous strength and additional power. As you know, another aircraft carrier will be deployed soon, so let's see how it goes. If we could settle this once and for all, that would be good.
Lama, what about the nuclear negotiations with Iran?
Yes, Joe, we've heard President Trump say that he prefers a deal with the Iranians. But he also said that if a nuclear deal is not reached, the president warned Iran of a very traumatic outcome. Now, he also said that regime change, which we just heard about, is the best thing that could happen. There are reports that a second round of talks between the United States and Iran is scheduled for next week. The United States wants Iran to stop enriching uranium. Iran has so far declared its willingness to limit its nuclear program in exchange for the lifting of sanctions. Meanwhile, as you heard, President Trump said that the United States is increasing its military presence in the region. A second American aircraft carrier, Gerald Ford, will head to the Middle East. This is, of course, the largest warship in the world. The aircraft carrier Abraham Lincoln is already in the region, Joe.
By March 10th to 12th, an unprecedentedly powerful group of the American fleet will be assembled in positions near Iran. By that time, either Iran and the United States will reach an agreement, or the United States will begin the actions for which all these forces have been gathered into a single fist. Let's ask General Keane, the head of the Institute for the Study of War, how he sees this, how he imagines what is happening now with or between the United States and Iran.
What do we gain from Gerald Ford heading to the Persian Gulf? Do you think we need 2 aircraft carriers there to effectively strike Iran?
Yes, absolutely, so that our audience understands. When we conducted Midnight Hammer in support of Israel's 12-day war to destroy Iran's nuclear program, we had 2 carrier strike groups in the region. Back then, probably not everyone knew about it, but that's just a fact. There are 2 things happening here, and that's why we're increasing our military presence in the region. And it's not noticeable to you because you don't see it. Dozens of planes and missiles are being moved into the region, and this has been happening for several weeks now. You know, to the numerous bases we have all over the Middle East region, and some of them have also been flying out from the Middle East, thanks to their range, which allows them to reach their targets. And obviously, we have capabilities in the United States as well, which we've made clear. During Operation Midnight Hammer, all bombing sorties were carried out by aircraft from the continental United States itself. So the second carrier group is already on its way here, and it's absolutely necessary considering all the other circumstances to accomplish 2 tasks. First, it's necessary so that we can provide protection for our American bases in this region, as well as help Israel defend its own bases and, of course, its populated areas, which were attacked during the 12-day war. And second is to carry out a comprehensive offensive campaign which will be quite large scale. Not only against their offensive potential, which includes thousands of rockets, launchers to support them, drone depots, and short-range missiles. This is the weapon they use for retaliation, and they will definitely respond. They demonstrated this during the 12-day war, and we must be properly prepared for this. And the means for this? First, we want to protect ourselves from what will be launched, and second, to prevent as many launches as possible. But I would say, at the early stage of the air campaign, we will strike at their offensive capabilities. In addition to leadership targets, the entire infrastructure that literally supports this regime will likely be targeted by our actions.
What exactly do we want from Iran? What are we doing there, and under what conditions? Will we leave and hand over the reins of power to a regional leader or a team of regional leaders?
Roll back Iran's nuclear capabilities, we've already done that. Limit Iran's ballistic missile program, stop Iran's support for regional militants, and end Iran's brutal suppression of protesters. 3 out of 4 are not up for discussion, according to the Iranians. And then at the meeting yesterday or 2 days ago between Netanyahu and President Trump, the Prime Minister showed the President irrefutable evidence that the Iranians ignored his warning not to kill protesters and instead killed tens of thousands. Well, that was another slap in the face to President Trump. Will this change his point of view?
Well, look, we have 46 years of experience dealing with these guys. I mean, we've been dealing with Iran for 5 decades now. And there are some things that are very consistent about them. First of all, they lie, and lie, deceive, and deceive. That's their usual pattern of behavior. They even deny things. After all this time, even after we bombed the nuclear facility, they still deny that they ever intended to develop nuclear weapons. It's only for civilian nuclear energy, and of course for civilian nuclear energy. That's exactly why they have underground facilities, why they have advanced centrifuges located half a mile underground, in concrete, protected, of course, by barrier systems, so we know what we're dealing with. Listen, President Trump, remember in 2018 he gave his staff the opportunity to make a better deal than the one Obama made. He said it was a bad deal. Why was it a bad deal? Because after 15 years, the restrictions would be lifted and Iran would be able to produce as much nuclear weapons as it wants. When everyone thought the purpose of the deal was to stop the production of nuclear weapons, in reality it actually gave them a path to it. We weren't able to renegotiate the deal with our allies. They didn't want to cooperate, so President Trump pulled out of the deal. He knows a good deal when he sees one. I just can't imagine that we could have done anything that wouldn't have fundamentally changed Iran's behavior in the region. After all, a military strike is aimed at the same thing because they won't do it through diplomatic means.
As Karl von Clausewitz said, war is the continuation of diplomacy by other means. By the way, I used to think that this phrase belonged to Talleyrand, but AI convinced me that it was Clausewitz who wrote a book about war. By the way, both Lenin and Stalin often quoted this book in their works. Now let's listen to our commander-in-chief.
It's very traumatic. I don't want this to happen, but we need to make a deal. They should have made a deal the first time, but instead they got a night strike. And it will be very traumatic for Iran if they don't make a deal. Look, if they don't make a deal, then it will be a completely different story. But we had a very good meeting yesterday with Bibi Netanyahu, and he understands. Well, the final decision is up to me. If this deal with Iran is not very fair and very good, then I think it will be a very difficult time for them.
And this is one of the most talented commanders in the United States, David Petraeus. Well, the man is already of age, of course, but there were legends about him.
How would you assess
The current state of affairs as of today?
Do you think Iran has been contained? Well, the main question is whether Iran is ready to make some compromises on its very tough stance on the nuclear program and whether inclusion is possible. As you mentioned, Prime Minister Netanyahu is urging President Trump to add the discussion of Iran's missile program as well. The next round of talks is scheduled. One has already taken place. As you probably remember, there were no breakthroughs. Apparently, the conversation was positive, according to some assessments, but Iran certainly hasn't budged on its nuclear program. And considering the uncompromising ideologue at the supreme leader's side, it's not entirely clear to me that they truly recognize reality. When, in a few days, 2 entire aircraft carrier strike groups will be in and around the area of Iran, do you have other assets? In Jordan, there are tankers. In Kazakhstan, bombers. In Qatar, B-2 bombers, of course, can fly from the United States and drop bombs just like they did on the last day of the 12-day war. So the question arises, and the president put it very well, will they be ready for serious negotiations, or will they have to face very, very serious military strikes from the United States?
As you can see, all analysts are saying this. The Iranian mullahs hope that their evasions and deceptions, their promises and assurances will save them this time as well. They actually have 2 problems right now. I don't know if they're taking them into account or not. The first is their patrons, their so-called sponsors. China and Russia are busy with their own affairs and can't really help them much, and they don't really want to stick their necks out either. And secondly, it means they're not dealing with the Bushes, the Clintons, Obama, or Biden, but with Donald J. Trump. And that's a completely different beast, as they say in our jungle. He brought in an armada of the Navy, the Air Force, special units, concentrated and coordinated actions with Britain and Israel. And he doesn't have to answer to anyone. Well, like the United Nations, no one is above him. Of course, there's Congress, but Trump will gather them. There's such a procedure. 4 members of the upper chamber, 4 members of the lower chamber, that's the leadership of the 2 parties, the top officials, so they'll inform them. And then he'll have 60 days to complete this operation, even if Congress doesn't approve it. These 8 will decide then when to convene Congress, how to inform them, what the agenda will be there, and so on. And now, ladies and gentlemen, the main thing is actually how our blockade of Venezuela and Iran, our pressure on Cuba, and our bringing Syria, once Russia's best friend, into the United States, Turkey bloc, and like the hunt for the tankers of the Chernomov fleet. Well, everyone knows perfectly well that they are Russian. How does all this affect Russia, China, and other enemies of the free world? Let's start with Russia. With the move away from the dollar, with the struggle between the global south and the capitalist west. So, what's the news from the capital of the shy swindlers and gentle sadists of the 21st century? Rick.
Press Secretary Dmitry Peskov. He stated that Russia did not abandon the dollar left us, and that's fine. Well, that's quite an interesting phrase coming from a Kremlin representative. Then he said, if the conditions change and the dollar becomes practical again, countries, including Russia, might start using it again.
Why did the dollar leave you? You fought against the dollar not just for survival, but to the death. The dollar was the main evil, the enemy, the villain. The dollar is printed in the United States and, well, to be completely honest, they print as much as they want. Because to print this piece of paper, it costs us 11 cents and the bill is ready, and you can go with it. And buy whatever we want while everyone else has to, let's say, mine, transport, and sell 1.5 tons of coal. Well, of course, it depends on the region and the grade. So, as Peskov said earlier, the dollar must be destroyed.
The thing is at Yeplant. And we left because we were forced to, not because we wanted to. Wait a second. Messages based on internal Russian proposals suggest that M embezzled the transport co-funding. Create forum sheets 1,500. If we reach an agreement on Ukraine, Russia is now saying that maybe we could implement joint energy projects. Maybe we could jointly invest in different things and develop cooperation.
It started to smell like money, and joint projects mean on the territory of Ukraine, maybe in Venezuela, Iran, Cuba, Syria, which are under our control. God only knows, but the main thing is, of course, 280 billion of frozen Russian assets could be used for investments in energy, industrial projects, and the reconstruction of Ukraine. The interest from this, the profit, will be generated, so it turns out that Russians are like the owners of this deposit, and this will be managed by Americans. And, well, among Americans, there are also corrupt people, but still, it's different. They sell out differently and for much less money. So the money will be clean, legal, no one will take it away, no one will confiscate it, and it can already be passed on to children, grandchildren, mistresses, and anyone you want. And suddenly the dollar went from being an enemy to, well, simply the best friend. But at the same time, excuse me, it's like a small but very sharp knife in the back of China, which was promoting the yuan. This is a betrayal of the yuan, isn't it? Very interesting, just really interesting.
So, that's the first part of the puzzle. Something is happening, and it's connected to Ukraine. Jason, please tell me about the Cuban Missile Crisis. What it was about. What happened back then.
The Cuban Missile Crisis? Well, do you want to know, how should I put it, just the general idea of what happened there? Or are you interested in more serious details or something?
Just what happened, in general, and I know I'm catching you off guard. I'm not sure I'll recall all the details, so just off the top of my head, here's what happened. Don't look it up or drag it out.
Don't look. Hands off the computer. So, the Cuban Missile Crisis is when they were going to place nuclear missiles in Cuba, or at least missiles that could reach the United States. And this was obviously a wake-up call for us. But the Soviets responded by saying that many European countries already had nuclear missiles aimed at them. So for them, it was just fair, but for us, it was like, oh, no one had done that before, and then it happened.
Oh, great. Do you remember which country it was that everything eventually came down to? Because in the end, it all came down to one country. No one remembers that. But that's what the real argument was about. You're right. It was about, wait, fairness should be mutual. You put them along our whole border, but that's not how it works. We'll put ours off your coast. If you can strike us in minutes, we can strike you in minutes too. And we said no, and we think that it's all over. We think that it's all over because Kennedy was so tough, and he said, I'm sending out ships, and you won't cross this line. And that's only part of the truth. But a deal was made. We'll remove our missiles from Turkey, and we won't pursue Turkey. All right, and at that time, Turkey was right on the border of the Soviet Union, and it was just like placing missiles. And so we said we would remove those missiles, since they were old and already outdated anyway. That's exactly what we said. So we'll remove ours, you'll remove yours, and we'll be even. That way, we both came out of the situation as winners.
Some people didn't know. It's news to me. I honestly thought Khrushchev decided not to get involved, but it turns out there was an exchange. Well, that's how it is. You live and learn.
My question is that we gave up on Turkey. Now we're heading toward another blockade, possibly because Russia just sent its ships, some vessels to provide aid and everything else to Cuba. Mexico is doing this, some other country is doing it too, and we said you won't come in, you won't be able to enter the port. Whether we'll set up a blockade or not, I don't know, but this feeling just seemed very, very similar to me. And I was talking to my friend and he said, Turkey?
What do you mean?
Are you talking about the country Turkey? That was the end of the Cuban Missile Crisis. Is it possible that the situation with Cuba, that this Cuban issue will be resolved by what we are doing and deciding in Ukraine, just like we resolved it last time with Turkey? Is it possible that all this is happening because they know that Donald Trump wants to take control of this hemisphere? And last time, when this happened, Russia gave in, but we had to sacrifice something. I'm curious what will happen, because now he's saying maybe the United States dollar again, maybe Society for Worldwide Interbank Financial Telecommunication again. They were restructuring. Remember, we were going to rebuild something, create something completely new to compete with that. He's saying maybe it'll come in handy. What's going on? Do you understand any of this? Jason, it seems like
that Glenn Beck thinks we're going to give up on Ukraine. I've said several times already that the United States will give anything to Ukraine at all before the elections this November. Naturally, and that the United States is tired, just like the people are tired of Ukraine not agreeing to a peaceful solution to the problem. Someone might say now, is Russia against Ukraine? No, gentlemen, Russia is on its own side and Ukraine is on ours. On whose side? From your point of view, can we exert so-called greater pressure, influence, whatever you want to call it, on those who, so to speak, receive money from selling their goods? Let it be oil, let it be gas, let it be anything at all. And either manufactures or buys their weapons and everything else, or on those who need something from us every day, every hour. Yes, something from us. Help us because we're defending democracy there. Help us because, well, you once said something, help us, we signed the Budapest Memorandum, or just help us, for Christ's sake. By the way, Christ, if I'm not mistaken, Zelensky is baptized, right? He's Jewish, but baptized. Well, anyway, it doesn't matter. And their leader, Comrade Zelensky, as they say, is mentioned. Don't mention him. In vain, he goes to conferences and jokes that he'll stop shooting at Russians when honest elections are held in Moscow. You see, I understand that this is a response to what Russia is saying, but the thing is, the audience bursts out laughing. And unlike at a concert where the audience is supposed to laugh, when performing there, it doesn't matter if you took your pants off, you're just telling jokes. Yes, and your task there is to make people laugh. But here your task is to save your people and your country, not to entertain those present whose lives at home are all good and everything is fine. They laughed, applauded, forgot, left, and went back to their own business. And
well, first of all, I think they are really desperate. I think this showed that they are a paper tiger, which we never considered them to be. But they survived, and they survived thanks to their alliance with the Axis powers, if you will. You know, with China and Iran and everyone else. So that's what they're doing. But now they are negotiating trade deals with the United States, as well as oil deals with the United States, and returning to our dollar. And all of this completely depends on Ukraine.
this, of course, is just a supposition, but the desire to separate Russia from China, as Nixon once did. By the way, only he separated China from Russia, from the Soviet Union at that time. So this has been a goal of American policy even before Obama. When Obama first came to the White House, so to speak, this was one of the tasks left to him by his previous presidents.
I think Ukraine is the main stake on the table.
That is, Ukraine is a chip on the table, an object of bargaining. Well, as they say in Russian, so to speak, it sounds unpleasant, but nevertheless, it's a bargaining chip in the game of major players. Is that what Ukraine was really so afraid of? Well, I personally am afraid of it. What does it mean that she didn't choose the lesser evil? And if Glenn Beck is right, then she lost because she didn't make compromises. It's quite possible that Trump decided that at Ukraine's expense he could drive a wedge into the alliance with the Celestial Empire and the Vast One, and as they say, even a tuft of wool from a scrawny goat is something. Sorry, Ukrainians, I'm not calling you a scrawny goat, it's just a figurative expression.
How crazy it would be if everything was the other way around. Russia turned upside down because of Ukraine, Russia turned upside down, and now they're against China. It's interesting, and I can quite imagine that this could really happen.
And it would be very interesting to see how what the left side will say. I remember in the 80s, the left was saying Ronald Reagan is a monster. He's going to kill us all and vaporize us and all that. Everything ended up the opposite, but it took longer than now. It's still fresh in our memory. We didn't have to wait 9 years for it to start falling apart, and it's falling apart right now. And every exhibit, and that seems to be the theme of today's show. Stop listening to the experts. Absolutely every expert has led us into this difficult situation. And now, the person who goes against all these specialists and moves in the completely opposite direction seems to be turning the whole situation around.
I want to point out that the hosts of American television and podcasts don't express any sympathy for Ukraine at all. I'm sorry, but it's true. Have you noticed that what concerns them is fighting the left, or if they're on the left, fighting the right? In other words, domestic issues. To break the alliance between China and Russia and bring the global south back to the dollar, well, globally speaking, the global south to the dollar, yes, investment projects. But the fact that for this Ukraine would have to be given to Russia is not mentioned at all, because they're just not interested in that at all, gentlemen. I'm sure you're not interested in what's happening in Gabon. Well, you're not interested in what's happening in Gabon, and you're probably not very interested in what's happening in Guatemala either, right? All right, is that it? I'm trying to explain to my Ukrainian friends that they have almost no time left to preserve their independence. I would say, until mid-August. Until that time, Trump is still interested in announcing and establishing peace in this part of the planet. It will be possible to come forward with this, announce that everything is great, and then in October, parade around on a horse about it. And that's because if things move toward rapprochement with Russia, separating Russia from China is much more important for American policy than not letting Ukraine lose the war. I understand that for you, this is the most important thing, and you can't understand how it could be otherwise, that it could be important to someone else. It doesn't matter, but I demonstrate this to you day after day. It's not important to most Americans. I mean, it's theoretically important. It's like in Gabon, Trump's idea of replacing the global policeman with regional gendarmes, and the organization of such protectorates, where there will be one power unafraid to use force, because today the United Nations doesn't use force, not because it doesn't want to, but because it can't. Probably this will play a positive role in preventing constant small and medium-sized wars on the planet, but possibly it will hand Ukraine over to a protector from Russia. Although Rubio is doing everything he can right now, well, some attempts, I don't know, everything possible. Not everything possible, it's just an expression. Everything possible, no. He is making attempts to revive dying Europe and give it strength to become a power, a bit of tautology, yes, to give it strength to become a power, as it once was for 3 or 4 centuries, but a power not aimed at expansion, but a power aimed at protection, the defense of the countries in its region and the defense of the whole region. From barbarians, both from within and from outside, who will definitely want to take what belongs to a pampered civilization. That's how it happened every time over, as I already said, 6,000 years. Honestly, I'm afraid that for Europe, the time is already past. and internal disagreements, as well as the presence of aggressive barbarians who envy them within these countries, have already decided their fate toward a caliphate. Well, or maybe, I don't know, prey that will be torn apart by more energetic predators. How it will happen, we don't know. Whether it will be Russia or Turkey, someone completely new and unexpected. But Europe will no longer be able to protect themselves, I'm afraid. Ukraine could have become the point of revival for the old lady, but it didn't. Another redistribution of the world is underway, and maybe it will save us. Maybe it will save our species, Homo sapiens, from complete destruction. Well, that's actually what we hope for. Well, then something will happen again. Something that will require a new Trump and new radical decisions. That is, we can't completely stop the process of self-destruction, but we can slow it down. And thank God there is a person who is doing that. Viva Trump, goodbye, to be continued.